do lots of things before you get into enablement. I know that sounds weird. I was an investment banker. I was in communications. I was in marketing. I've done a lot of stuff. Every single role that I've had brings my perspective to how I approach enablement. The biggest game changer within Gong Enable, I think, is the ability to actually create content and create these role plays that are absolutely connected. So if, let's say, for example, we'll find the toughest procurement persona that we've ever gone across, and we're going to use that for them to practice on, because it's not Stacey over in the corner creating a mock scenario. It's actually pulling from those conversations that they're already having.
Whoa, super interesting. One great hot take you shared was that enablement is your least favorite word.
I hate it. Enablement means something different to every single company. That's actually led to some of the challenges that enablement as a profession has faced in terms of actually defining the value that they're bringing to the business.
Do you have a better word for the industry? All right, Stacey, I'm super excited to talk to you today. I mean, I've been interviewing enablement people all month, and everyone mentions Gong as their favorite, like their number one tool for enablement. So I'm excited to talk about all things Gong today. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Well, there's no better way that I would love to start this conversation off with than you telling me that everyone's talking about Gong. So I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to.
Yeah, it's literally a meme. Like I ask people, like, "What's your favorite tool?" And they're just like, "Gong, Gong, Gong." So it's awesome.
Makes my day. We should do this more often.
Yeah. So you joined like just about 2 years ago, I think, as the VP of Go-to-Market Enablement. Can you talk a little bit about like what the function looked like when you first arrived and how it's kind of transformed in the last couple of years?
Yeah. So just over 2 years, and I think it's changed a lot. I think Gong was in a really different place 2 years ago. The enablement program really focused on really great training, but it was very siloed. So one of the things that was happening at Gong at the time was everything was leader-led. And so different segments were doing different things, and there was no consistency kind of across the different teams. And so what we've really focused on across the board in go-to-market, but also in enablement, is driving a lot more consistency. So my team is structured and aligned across the go-to-market to drive more repeatability, more predictability. We're organized around outcomes. So think onboarding, product, leadership enablement, performance enablement, and then we're specifically aligned to business impact. So the win rate, ramp time, productivity, expansion. So we're getting kind of out of the check the box training completion siloed driven sort of approach to enablement and more into the revenue workflow to drive much more of a standard operating rhythm across each of the different segments and align the teams on what they need to know.
Super interesting. I think you talk like, just to give the audience a sense, like what's the scale? Like how many sellers and go-to-market folks are we talking about? How many enablement people are supporting them? Can you share kind of some rough numbers?
I mean, we've grown a lot. We're talking pretty much, let's say, like just over 1,000 across the go-to-market, and that includes. So we're focused on enabling across everything from SDRs all the way through to support. So all of our customer-facing teams, and we've got about a global team. We've opened teams. We have 5 different hub offices in North America right now. We have a large EMEA presence. It's one of our fastest-growing markets right now, and also opened in Singapore. So we have a fully global approach to.
Super interesting. And so a lot of our conversation today is going to be about using Gong at Gong. And there's like this, I mean, super interesting meta dimension to your job. Very much like us at Doc, like you're using the platform, I assume, all the time that your reps are selling. So how does that change how you work?
It completely changes how we work. From an enablement perspective, at least, because it's like this whole, you said it, it's this whole meta sort of approach. At the most meta experience, we just recently rolled out Gong Enable, and I got to enable using Gong Enable on Gong Enable, right? It was kind of a joke. How many times can you use the word enable? But it's really magical. And I think you guys probably see this as well, because you get to do things like enabling on the product. And so you're teaching them how to sell it, which is usually, that's like the typical approach. That's typically what you do in enablement when you're not selling what you're selling, you're not using what you're selling. But then we also get to train them on how to use it, right? And I think that's a huge thing that has changed over the course of 2 years at Gong. We are customer zero. We are Gong first in everything that we do. So when we're rolling out a product, we're teaching them how to use it as much as we're teaching them how to sell it. And that drives so much more confidence, so much more knowledge around it. But I also think it speaks to the value of Gong I'll be honest, because I think that's absolutely led us into some of the performance and just some of the stickiness that we've had with it.
Does it create any weird challenges of like, or, I mean, I imagine sellers have just tons of feedback or something. It's like they're going through it, they're using the product all the time. I mean, that's also probably good for the product team to hear all that. Like, it's an interesting dynamic.
There are definite challenges and definitely different things to have to deal with. So one thing, we get in and we use the product early. So we start using sort of like alpha code, beta code on different things. So it might mean the product's not ready. So the field has to be a little bit more like accepting of things that are happening in the product and realize that like it's just like any other software development program. You're probably going to use something that's still early. So there's that. There's always feedback, there's always different things. But then there's also the pressure that you've got a services team that is out there implementing Gong to all of these customers, and you're running without a playbook a little bit because you're kind of leading the way on how it's going to go. And as much as I'd love to say our services team is helping my team implement Gong, we're kind of out here on our own and driving a lot more accountability to how we're using it. So we're kind of running without a playbook, which is fun. We get to really try and kind of push the boundaries a ton.
Can you talk through like how you actually kind of use Gong to run your enablement programs, and what does that look like day to day? Because I'm just going to assume you're the best practice, right, of how do you use Gong and kind of all the different ways. So we'll love to kind of go through like, I don't know, the stack of all the different things that Gong offers. Because I know there's obviously the core call recording, feature where you started the company, but then there's obviously all the intelligence around it. So yeah, would love to kind of hear like, how do you use Gong at Gong?
Yeah, I'm going to start with saying, core call recording and conversational intelligence and all of that. Like when that came out, and I mentioned this to you, I bought Gong in 2018. That was game changing for me, right? As an enablement professional, getting in, understanding what's happening. And that to me, that's still so hugely valuable. And then from an enablement perspective and from a Gong perspective over the course of the pandemic, Gong really focused on products like Gong Forecast and Gong Engage. And those are really important tools for the revenue workflow. They're very important for enablement to kind of tie into how we're driving and measuring impact. But I will say that it's been in like the last 12 to 18 months that the functionality within Gong has like truly changed the game for me and for my enablement team. So we've rolled out this enablement flywheel that we actually use in-house. So the concept of this is detect. So identify what's actually happening in the field. Understand, for example, what gaps do you have in skills? What's not happening? What competitors are you actually seeing? But it's basically leveraging the AI in the system. So that's Ask Anything. That's the AI Theme Spotter to go in and actually identify what's going on and identify those gaps. To me, that's so fundamental in terms of actually connecting to the field. And that's been a big thing missing. So we leverage that. We leverage the next step in the flywheel is prescribe. And that is where you start to create the targeted content. That is functionality like AI Builder. It's probably my favorite feature right now.
I don't know if I knew about this one.
AI Builder is inside of our foundational product, and it is you can go into AI Builder and say, create a battle card for me against X competitor, or create discovery questions for Gong Enable for a sales professional, and it will build the content for you. I will say it's a start. It's probably accelerated the workflow of my team by weeks in terms of helping them to be able to create content that isn't, you're not starting with a blank page. You're going in, you're pulling insight from what's actually happening in the conversations and customer engagements, and then building and kind of being able to create content, create job aids, create lessons, create whatever you need to from an enablement perspective. Then it gets into AI role play, which is part of our new Gong Enable SKU. This has changed the game for us. To me, this is actually what scales enablement to be able to drive that consistency I was talking about and connect theory to reality. And that's kind of a big thing for me. So AI role play, AI trainer includes also these micro lessons. So you can create the job aid, you can create the AI role play. The AI role play is building off of your own system. So it's directly related to what's happening in the field, directly related to what's working. You can build that. You give your reps and revenue professionals in general an absolute opportunity to practice based on what's happening in their market. And then I think the final thing, and this is where I live, it's being able to validate that it's working. So things like automated scorecards, getting in and actually, attaching these AI-driven automated scorecards and call reviewers into a conversation, into the calls. So then reps, CSM, no one has any idea that they're actually being rated, but I'm getting all this visibility to understand, how is this actually working? Is this being adopted? Are they actually doing what we asked them to do? And where do I need to now go focus to help them to actually get better? So that's kind of the workflow that we follow.
It's super interesting. And yeah, I mean, the product has changed quite a bit. I didn't know about the content generation side of things, and I knew about the but that's amazing. Yeah.
I think the thing about it, and this is, I did a webinar last week launching Gong Enable. And one of the questions that came through was, isn't this just going to replace enablement? And my answer to that is no, absolutely not. I think what it's finally doing is getting enablement to a place where you're much closer to the field. You're creating content that is actually going to impact the business. And I think it's what's been expected for enablement to do. We just didn't have the tools at our fingertips to do it.
And it just gives you higher leverage. I mean, there was no way before you could listen to 1,000 calls from the
No.
field and connect those patterns across. It's just like it's like not possible. And now you could do that instantly, and then get those insights or create content based off it. I mean, AI, it's insane what's possible today.
Or you can use AI Theme Spotter, go in, ask what are the biggest objections that are happening. And I don't know if you noticed, but AI Theme Spotter will actually pull it up and it'll give you the biggest objections. And then it will tell you how many opportunities it's impacting, how much ARR it's impacting. And you can actually see the impact of the list that's in front of you based on the impact on the business.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then that obviously feeds the product roadmap, I assume, too, and like the things you need to build, like where are the gaps and things. Yeah, it's pretty fundamental. I mean, I think like it's so interesting how like the call itself has become such an important artifact in the world of AI. I feel like everybody's scrambling to, I mean, even at Doc, right? Like we have a great integration with Gong where we can build business cases and things, but like that fundamental data is the call itself and all those different conversations. And I mean, I think it positions Gong so well in kind of this next, generation.
And it's being able to leverage. I think the big thing there is, how do you leverage all of that unstructured data? So now you've got it, or you got this recording. I think the magic is saying, like, how do you use it? And to me, that's where it's all coming through from an enablement perspective to give you exactly what you're talking about, the trends that you want, like the insight that you need. And if you think about enablement going from one to many, right? That's why you need those trends. You need to understand what's actually going on. The individual call is great, and sales managers and, customer success managers, they get so much value from that. But from an enablement perspective, I want to see the trends.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in one call, you might get like wrong data. Like maybe it was just a bad sales rep, right? Who was handling objections really poorly. But if you can sum that up across 1,000 reps, then like, okay, it's really interesting data and gives you a spidey sense of kind of what to go improve.
Yep, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit more about Gong Enable because I think it's super interesting. I mean, the AI role play space is heating up. I was at an enablement conference a couple of weeks ago, and it's like everybody was talking about AI role play. I'm curious, like, how you think about it, because I think there is some skepticism of like, oh God, I'm talking to the AI. Is this the same? Am I going to game it? Like, is it good for all types of sales reps? Is it only good for SDRs? Like, would an enterprise AE even use this thing? Like, how do you think about kind of the place for Gong Enable and where it's most impactful?
Do you know that in all of this, I have never thought, would my enterprise rep use it? Maybe that's because I'm sitting at Gong. I think that Gong's AI role play is so tied into what's happening in the business that I think it's relevant for anyone. So my approach to enablement is literally, and it's always been this pre-Gong, it's how do you connect theory to reality? Like, it's really great to go in and teach someone concepts, teach someone a methodology. And then typically you're going through and you're creating mock scenarios and you're having them go through role plays, whether that's in person or whatever. But like that's kind of been a workflow that enablement has really kind of gone through. But I think the thing that it's been missing is being connected to exactly what's happening. So to me, the biggest game changer within Gong Enable, I think, is the ability to actually create content and create these role plays that are absolutely connected. So let's say, for example, your enterprise team is really struggling on negotiating against procurement professionals. Like, the ability to go in and basically set it up so that you can say, I'm going to build out this negotiation role play. The persona is going to be procurement, and we're going to use all of the insight and the data from all the calls that we've had with procurement professionals where we've done really well, or we'll find the toughest procurement persona that we've ever gone across, and we're going to use that for them to practice on before they go into it. I think that's what changes the game, because it's not Stacey over in the corner creating a mock scenario that I think is what's happening in the field. It's actually pulling from those conversations that they're already having. So the credibility goes up completely, because it's not like, it's literally what's happening to inside of their accounts.
Gotcha. So I want to just play this back to you. So, okay, so you take all the data from the calls from those scary procurement people, and then that kind of builds the model of the AI role play procurement person. Whoa, super interesting. Yeah. So it makes it more real.
It does, and to me, like, it's like a no-brainer. Like, no matter what level you're at, if I can do this and I can use this in a way that's actually gonna reflect what I'm gonna get on, why wouldn't I wanna get better?
And it's such better than I think a lot of role play software I've seen where it's really just like prompts where you're kind of building workflows over here. Like there's no like real underlying data to the thing you are talking to, right? Yeah, really interesting.
That's why you mentioned this, but it all comes back down to that data, and it's what you do with it.
Mhm.
And so AI role play within Gong is one way that we're using that data to be able to kind of create a more realistic scenario. I will also say, though, I think I'm a big fan, and even before we had AI role play, I'm a big fan of making sure that when we're doing a certification like that, we're not just doing the role play side of it, but then connecting to real customer calls. So in our certifications, I actually require like 2 customer calls showing that behavior. And I can see the adoption metrics and I can see all that in Gong, but that gives me I do an AI assist scorecard where then our managers have to go in and score 2 customer calls for each one of their reps in terms of the certification. So I'm like, it's that end hook that says, okay, now they're actually talking to customers, and we can score that inside of Gong and see that.
It makes sense. So yeah, the role play is just kind of the starting point. They get on a real call, and then the manager can reinforce and validate that okay, they actually learned whatever behavior it was.
Yep.
So how do you think about like legacy LMS systems? And because I think part of Gong Enable, like there is structured learning and micro learning and different things like that. So is there still a place for e-learning training courses, kind of like what, I guess enablement training has been for like the last 10 years? How do you think about kind of that category of systems?
Yeah, I think that for most teams, LMS will stay. LMS will still be there, and I think there are like inside of Gong. You're right. We have a lot of capability to do what I would kind of consider micro learning. So lessons that you can go through. Maybe it's teaching the methodology around that negotiation that I was talking about. So you can have them go through 2 or 3 different pages of lesson and then get them into the role play. And I think that serves itself really well. But there are things that you want to teach them about. So maybe it's like maybe you're rolling out a whole new like an entirely new messaging, and you want them to understand why they did different things and how this went, or you want them to actually take a test that demonstrates that they know what's going on. That's going to happen in an LMS. And so I do think that there is a legacy, like I do think that the LMS systems are still there, and I think they still play a role. What I find to be the most valuable, though, is literally how I can actually track behavior change. And so that's why I'm tending to move much more close to the micro learning sort of concept, but I still do find reason for us to actually have to train in a longer form way.
And I've also heard like you talk more about like this continuous enablement flywheel versus like one-time training and that more traditional LMS model where you just check the box, okay, they did the thing, like moving on. Can you talk about that and maybe the relationship between continuous enablement and micro learning? I think is super interesting.
So I'll give you an example. So one way that we run our field enablement, which is really our skills focused team, is and it's one way that we all came together. So I mentioned before we used to be very like siloed and everyone was running their own programs. Now we actually do we like separate our programs into mountains, rocks, and pebbles. And so the mountain is like where we really focus on a big skill. So let's say in Q2, we're going to focus on negotiation. That's our big skill. And 80% of like that core skill that we're building out in terms of how we're going to drive it is the same for like all of the different segments. But that happens in Q2 and it's big and we run like a big program. There can be role play in that now. We can do certification, whatever. But let's say you start in at Gong in Q4, right? Like that to me is like, so one thing that we're doing is saying, how do we take these big core mountain programs and then take them and break them into micro learnings that we can use for a continuous enablement or that we can arm a manager with. And when they sit down and have performance conversations and they can say, you're really caving on all those discounts, we need you to go in and actually practice this, that's there in a way that like matches the format that we're driving. So that's one way that we're connecting kind of like these bigger programs into evergreen, I would say, and really focused on arming the managers with that. But then the second side of that is that concept of the call reviewers and constantly looking at and saying, okay, we've got this negotiation, we've trained on it. Now let's get these automated AI call reviewers going so that in stage 6 of the sales process, it's jumping on every time a procurement person is there. We're scoring it based on the rubric that we created, and we can start to see how that's rolling and give it like a quarter and go in and understand where folks are working well, where's the gaps, and then we can go in and do really laser-like focused enablement to help improve those gaps.
How do you think about enablement's role, like coaching and working with managers? Because obviously managers, as you mentioned, are super important part of this like reinforcement side of things. But it'd be cool, but there's no Gong call recorder in the manager's one-on-one with their team.
We do
And so,
that.
how do you think about that? Oh, you do that? No way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I have a dedicated leadership enablement manager, and we have a dedicated focus on that right now. And it's actually we've integrated and worked directly with our field ops team and our strategy team, and we've built out a really in-depth manager operating rhythm, which focuses on it's basically 13 activities that we know our managers have to do. So that can include things like forecast inspection, pipeline inspection, one-on-ones, deal reviews, things like that. And at Gong, it probably won't surprise you, but we do record all of our calls. And so we've actually built our leadership enablement program into this Gong workflow where we have the skills. So let's say it's pipeline inspection. We've identified that activity and the skills that are required within that. And we built micro learning so that the second line or third line leaders can help and use that to actually drive self-enrollment and help them to improve it based on the calls that we've had. So we do score them. We do actually show this, and we actually that's how we actually help take the skills of the managers up. We have a whole enablement program that we run helping to focus on those things. We've got a monthly cadence on that. But by putting it into the AI role play and the like, it actually helps to drive more adoption across the leaders too. So yeah, we use it for all of that.
Very cool. I mean, I feel like that's like how organizations will be in the future as like all the call and the things that say in meetings just become such a central part of AI and we want to use that more. Like it might feel kind of weird and uncomfortable for some organizations, but it definitely feels like it's kind of the future.
It's part of the revenue ops and strategy team. We're looking at things and saying, we're just actually in a performance review cycle. And it's like, it would be really nice. And you can mark calls private and Gong. So let me just put this out there. But we're recording all of our calls now so that, for example, if I'm having one-on-ones, I can pull up one-on-ones. I can go to AI Builder and say, what's the most important thing I need to focus on with this person right now? Brilliant. And so I do think that that's actually starting to change the game as it relates to even internal management.
Switching gears a little bit, I think one thing I read on Gong's blog is that you recently rebuilt your onboarding program. And so AI, I think, played a really big part in that. And so can you talk us through kind of what you built and how you transformed the onboarding program?
We had a massive success with our onboarding program last year. So and there were a few things we did. The first is I will say we moved it to from a presentation, inform, output only sort of live sessions to flip classroom. So we've really kind of driven this on demand. If you're going to learn something, you're gonna log on, you're gonna learn something, and then you're gonna come on and you're gonna workshop it. And so this was even before we had role play, but we've now integrated role play into all of that. But we're gonna make sure that we're spending time with you and that you're actually showing and being able to activate that. So we've done that. AI role play I mentioned is integrated into everything. So that's part of it. We have actually gone through and working with the strategy team, identified 5 KPIs that work across all of our sales team. So it's things like Gong calls listened to, uh, book tiered. So in terms of prioritization, number of customer emails, number of customer calls, and we've now started to incorporate scorecards and activity into their overall comp strategy. So our new hires get comped based on how they're achieving each of their different KPIs. That's actually been amazing, and we've built our program around driving to those metrics. And then I think the final thing, and I don't think that this is undervalued, and sometimes I think it's overlooked, is that we have worked directly with our managers in terms of ensuring that they're coaching to their success. So leveraging dashboards that show all of that KPI data, they're critical, and we're enabling them all the time on how they're coaching their new hires, how they're getting it there so that they can actually scale that and so that their new hires will get to be productive as fast as possible.
And if I'm an AE who's joining Gong, is it enablement kind of leads a bunch of, classroom trainings or before I actually get on the phone, or am I working with managers from day one? How do you think about that kind of relationship between the enablement team and the manager in that onboarding?
It's all happening in parallel. And I think that's actually the coolest thing. We have aligned, for example, the date that our new reps get their books to the date that they are trained on how to tier them. And so we've like completely aligned on that. Managers actually are given a debrief before any new hire cohort starts. They've got their direction. They're in there. They're running, and we're doing both AI role play as well as manager certifications throughout the entire program. So we're just tightly connected throughout the whole thing. So it's not like we just take your reps out and say, we're going to have your reps for 2 weeks and you're not going to see them. We fully integrate their workflow in with the managers. And in fact, in like some of our segments, they actually have to have like 3 to 5 qualified opportunities before they leave their first month. So we're fast.
Yeah, they get on the phones real quick. And then obviously with Gong, you can kind of see how well they're doing, which is amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about Enablement's kind of relationship with managers, but I'm curious how you think about your relationship with sales leadership. I mean, a lot's changing. There's a lot of different priorities. Like, how do you think about kind of, building trust with the sales leaders, coming up with the program and the roadmap? And I imagine prioritization is really hard. There must be a million requests thrown at you. So how do you think about kind of working with the CRO and the other VPs of sales to kind of build out the enablement program that's going to work for the field?
So one thing I will say, and I will applaud Gong for this, but I think it's important across all of it. I am part of the revenue leadership team, so I sit on that with all of the senior sales leaders and customer success leaders with the CRO. So I have a voice and a seat at the table first and foremost. So I know from the get-go what's important and what's not, and that helps us to prioritize that. I think the second part of that is that I have from the very beginning of starting here looked at how does this actually drive the business impact and how are we actually inside of that revenue workflow. And I think that matters. I think that actually helps to like drive and build credibility because I'm actually looking at what's in the sales process and connected with that. And then I think third, it's listening to them, right? You can't always do everything. I am not the type of leader who's like, yes, we're going to do that for you. Yes, we're going to do that for you. In fact, I probably say no more than I say yes. But I think that actually helps me to build a lot more credibility with them because I'm trying to get down to what's actually going to matter to their business, not to overwhelm them with enablement. And I think that's a huge part of it.
And what about the marketing team? Because obviously marketing and product marketing is really, works really closely with enablement to deliver the training. Gong Enable is getting rolled out. And so how does your team sort of work with the product marketers as you launch new products or go into new segments, different things like that?
I probably have a much stronger connection there. I actually come from product marketing. That's where I spent a lot of my career. So I come over here, so I understand what they're doing. And I also will tell you that the biggest lesson I learned in my career was when I moved from product marketing over into sales. I understand the difference, and I get kind of the like as much as product marketing really wants to be part of that sales team, it's hard. So I do find myself as the bridge between that. I work incredibly close with our product marketing team as well as our CMO. I have a weekly one-on-one with our CMO. Like, so to me, being able to align what's actually happening in the business with the marketing programs that are happening when I'm really focused on rolling out what we would call sales plays so that we can activate our programs. And to me, that's an integrated approach with like product marketing, demand gen, enablement, sales strategy. And so I'm focused on driving all of that and working incredibly closely with product marketing and also with the rest of it. I will say that actually does come back to something we talked about earlier. When you're we're the buyer, right? So we're also a key persona for marketing, and I think that helps us to like drive a tight relationship with them as well.
Yeah, I mean, they must want to talk to you all the time to be like, does this messaging work? Well, people like this billboard, like, right? All that type of stuff.
So everyone, if no one likes the messaging, they can all start to blame the buyers here, the personas here.
Yeah. One thing where I assume there's a lot of overlap is around like competitive intelligence programs, and Gong is in a category that's consolidating a lot of fast. I mean, Highspot and Seismic just announced a merger. Clarion SalesLoft merged last year. Like, how do you keep reps sharp when the competitive landscape is shifting so quickly? How do you think about your intelligence program?
So I actually own competitive enablement. And so I have someone on my team who is dedicated to that, which is great. And one of the things that we have taken it is we've kind of stripped it out. So when I look at that and worked collaboratively actually with the CMO to move this and to make this happen, there's a lot of like strategic competitive research that goes into product and that goes into messaging and all of that. And so there's a team that does that. My competitive enablement programs are completely tied to win rate. And so we are looking at this and saying, how do we get insight into the field hand as fast and as we possibly can? Gong helps with that. I'm not going to lie. just last week, there was a sales leader who went to the executive team, and I know every enablement leader has gone through this, or every competitive intel leader has gone through this, where they say, this competitor is coming up. And of course, I get hit, and my competitive person gets hit, and it's like you go to the system, and it's like one account, one, right? So that's the power of Gong, and I think that's exactly how we start to keep our team up to speed. So we have a number of like AI agents that we help with to give real-time information. We use like AI Builder even to be able to go in and get real-time insights. We're constantly like mining the data in there and constantly working to get insight and in tell out to the field. I will say, I think one thing that's changed a lot in competitive intel is it's gone are the days of creating like battle cards that you update like once a month, once a quarter. I think the market's moving so fast, and there's so many different players, and there's so much consolidation that you're just constantly moving, and you have to stay on your toes.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much it's all evolving and how data is. And actually, our head of marketing, who's also producer of the podcast, quietly listening on this call, has built like a crazy Claude code thing that's scraping our competitor websites to like update battle cards and things pretty automatically. And I mean, it's a crazy different world than when I was running marketing at Lattice and had to really hand curate all that stuff.
I mean, we've just created inside of Gong using AI briefs and all of this, and an opportunity for us when we have a competitive deal that's won. It automatically goes into an AI brief. That AI brief is then sent over to our competitive intelligence person, who's able to go through that and then turn it into a podcast like that.
Crazy. And one really interesting thing, which I've always admired about Gong, is it seems like you've always opted to build your own products versus buy products and sort of stitch them together. Can you talk a little bit about like why that's a better approach?
One reason, I think I'll just state the obvious, is that we're not sitting here like worrying about how do we integrate systems that were built on completely different tech stacks, completely different like foundational elements. And I think that's been a really, really important thing for the cleanliness, I don't know, like for the integrity of the product, right? So nothing that's been built in the product is being like is kludgy and kind of being put together in order to make it work. The other thing I will say, and this is so I started as a design partner with like product back in 2020, well before I ever worked here. And I've had experience working with them and working with product. And I will tell you, I've never worked with a product team who is more on top of the market need, more on top of like and ahead of the game in terms of how they're designing the technology, and also that moves faster. And so I think there's a core confidence in this company around what product can do and how they can do it, and even having hindsight in terms of how can we do it better than how it's been done by other companies. And I think that by building it, it gives us that competitive advantage to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, companies with product at the center are always the best and most successful, in my opinion. Yeah. Trying to do that at Doc too. We've talked a ton about Gong and how you use Gong, but I got to ask, is there any other tools in your enablement tech stack that you use and rely on? And yeah, like how do you think about kind of where Gong fits into your overall tech stack?
Yeah, so it's funny, and any vendors I talk to, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm probably the hardest person to sell to because we do have a Gong first approach, and we probably are being a bit like excessive, but we do have technology, and we look to technology that we can ultimately embed into our workflow in Gong. So that would include like data enrichment sort of things that we leverage, digital sales room that we would incorporate and integrate inside of Gong so that we can actually have a single source of of truth for customers, things like that. Where we can, it's Gong first. We definitely drink our own Kool-Aid there.
Yeah, of course.
So we take a very basic approach to content management. We're leveraging Google to do that, and then we've got a Glean search on top of that. So my philosophy on some of that is that content management is moving away from navigation-based into search-based, and I think it'll even move into like real-time creation and things. So we kind of try to stay fluid on those things and kind of look ahead of the market and say, where are we headed? So that's kind of how we look at content management as well.
It's a great approach. Back to Gong. So I'd love to talk more about like how you think about selling AI, because obviously you're selling AI products to enterprise buyers who are both excited and cautious, and it's all changing and it's moving so fast. And so how do you like train reps to kind of have that conversation and explain how Gong AI is different than, another conversation intelligence tool and things like that?
I think that it comes down to outcomes and it comes down to showing the value of that. I think one of the things that AI is producing is a lot of hype around, oh my gosh, it's AI, it's AI, it's AI. But it doesn't matter that it's AI unless you do something with it. And so I think we focus on outcomes. We focus on how are you driving your ramp time? How are you improving productivity? How are you decreasing, improving forecast accuracy? Things like that. Because that's actually what the AI will do for you and help you to do versus just kind of driving with AI. And I think that to me is the biggest thing that we really focus on. Yeah, there's a lot of really fun, cool AI functionality that we can do inside of Gong, but ultimately what matters to the customer and what's actually going to deliver value is how are you actually helping me do this in my business? And it's really focusing on the productivity and the value that's coming from that. And that's where all of our enablement and all of our focus centers.
And where do you think this is all heading? Like, if you're telling another enablement person how they can leverage AI in their business, I mean, you answered a little bit there, but like, how can they sift through all this? What types of technologies should they be investing in? How do they think about their like AI tech stack both today and kind of in the future? Like, if I want to be a forward-thinking enablement person, how should I, tackle kind of this challenge?
Well, you should be leveraging Gong. I'm just kidding.
Duh.
I think that one of the things I was just actually talking to some reps today about this. I think, we're really looking at this world of human assisted AI. Every single thing is going to be automated, but man, we're going to be able to automate a lot of stuff. And to me, I think that actually might even center some of the importance and some of the strength around how a go-to-market organization functions, but even more so into that RevOps function and into that enablement function, because the heart of like how you're actually operating a go-to-market could actually settle in how those workflows that you're creating and the prescription that you're giving in terms of what's working and what's not. And so to me, I think from an enablement perspective, it's truly getting around and getting as much insight that you can around what's actually happening in your market, what's actually happening in the business on that front line so that you can actually create the prescription that the field needs and that's actually going to help drive the needle.
And like, how do you help? I mean, like sales reps, beyond just the enablement folks, but the sales reps themselves leverage this technology. Because I feel like I've seen, emails from my sales reps where they dump it into Chat GPT, and it's like clearly an AI generated email, right? Like, and so, yeah, I don't know. There are programs at Gong that kind of help, AEs figure out like what's the right way to use this and when to do it, and how do I human assist it sort of in the right way.
One thing that I think enablement folks don't get to see when they're using Gong is the value that comes to the rep. And so I get to see it a little bit when I talk to customers, but like inside of Gong, the workflows and the information that comes to the rep in terms of not just the research that they can do, the pushes that they can have, the nudges that come with things, but the way that it actually tracks down, here's the next thing that you need to do. Hey, by the way, have you done that next thing? Is it there? The content, like it'll like the generation of email, like that is automatically done by AI that will come up and like, hey, here's your follow-up email that you should send. And you can send that in like, 15 minutes after you get off of that call. The quality of all of that inside of Gong is just continually improving to the point that it's like, this is amazing and it's giving me such solid. So I think that the way that like reps actually get to use this is and get to really get stuck on it is like seeing just how much it automates and optimizes the overall workflow and makes their job easier.
One great hot take you shared right before we started recording was that enablement is your least favorite word. Can you share why?
I hate it. It's my least favorite word in the dictionary. Try talking to someone and telling them what enablement means. And try going into an organization as an enablement leader. Let's even say you're looking for a job and you're talking about it. Enablement means something different to every single company, even to every single person that does it. And there's some benefit to that. But I do think it's because it quickly became, it's not even become, it quickly became my least favorite word because I think you have to step back and say, okay, what are we truly trying to accomplish when we're talking about an enablement program, right? What are we truly trying to do? And, it gets you into those conversations. It gets you into like really setting the stage, but it's just a word that like just means so many different things to so many different people. And I think that that's actually led to some of the challenges that enablement as a profession has faced in terms of actually defining the value that they're bringing to the business.
Do you have a better word for the industry? Like
No,
that's a
I
hard
tried.
question. Yeah.
If I could, I would name my team something else.
Yeah.
There's always I've seen different things coming up, transformation, productivity, acceleration, but there's I can't. I
Yeah,
know.
it's hard.
I
Yeah.
feel like I'm criticizing something without a solution. I get
But
that.
fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I
I
mean,
do
I feel like now the hot, words are some like AI orchestrator, sales orchestrator, or something like that. But that only captures a little part of the job, right? It's not the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah. Someday I will figure it out,
One day. One
but I
day.
don't
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I think a great place to end this podcast has been such a fun conversation is I'm curious. I mean, you've had an amazing career in enablement across a lot of different companies. Like, what advice do you have for other enablement folks who are maybe earlier in their career and kind of want to get to where you are? Like, if you look back on your career, like, how have you kind of gotten here? What advice would you have for them?
Do lots of things before you get into enablement. I know that sounds weird. If I were to go back in my career, I mean, my career stems over I was an investment banker, I was in communications, I was in marketing, I've done a lot of stuff. And I think my perspective on every single role that I've had brings my perspective to how I approach enablement, and I think that actually helps to drive the value and drive that perspective. So, my advice, especially if someone's starting off in enablement, try lots of different things. If you're in enablement already, try product enablement, try field enablement, go try all of these different things so that you can expand your perspective and your experience. Like, go carry a bag for a while, go be a CSM. But all of that strengthens your ability to do incredible things as an enablement leader or enablement manager. And I think that's really important in terms of like driving the success of your role.
Thank you so much for the time today, Stacey. This is a really fun conversation.
Thank you, Alex. It's been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow and Tell. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also subscribe to our newsletter for weekly updates at growandtellshow.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks.